Welcome to the Shaylee Show. I'm the host. I'm Shaylee. And this show isn't about me at all. It's about you. So I have my panelists and panelistas come on without introduction or any kind of fanfare because, you know what? You're the only expert for you. And so we talk about things and we say, hey, this is what it looks like from my angle, and oh yeah, here are a couple jokes. And hopefully, in the space that we create and the conversations we bring to light, you find your own truth.
All right, so know versus think. I think that's an interesting topic for people who are exploring the idea of things outside of the mind. First, we could talk about what is knowing and what is thinking, and then sort of when those are useful, when do you use your mind, when do you just know stuff, can you just know stuff? So I'm going to push that on onto the table, and you can kind of like pick up pieces of it and like talk to it. Frank, I've read a lot of stuff that you've written on this topic, so I'll throw it to you if you want to start.
Knowing and thinking?
Yes, knowing and thinking.
Thinking for me is like the exploratory part of figuring out what you know and what you don't know. And I guess moving towards like a conclusion of knowing something.
Okay, so when you talk about that, I sort of get the visual of like the periodic table where it's like you're like creating space for stuff, information to come in.
Yeah, that could work. That could work. And then you're just like, boom, like everything's in there.
Okay, I like that. Margot, you're an incredible thinker.
That's all I do. It's like, oh my God. And yeah, knowing and thinking, for me personally, they are like two opposite ends of reality. So knowing is a very has a foundation. There's a calm piece to it. It's like a guttural feeling and intuition. And like I said, there's a foundation there. There's a groundedness to it, even if you can't pinpoint what that is. And thinking has no foundation for me. It's more chaotic. It's like riding the waves. And the thing with thinking is I've noticed that when you're just in a state of thought, it's so much easier to attach feelings to that. So thinking and your thoughts can be swayed by external stimuli and then even, the feelings that you have. And knowing is just, again, very peaceful. It's solid. It's not swayed by the external. It's concrete. And that's how I view the two in my way. But yeah, I agree with Frank in saying that sometimes those thoughts you need to like ride the waves of the thoughts to find where, are you laughing at me? No, I'm kidding. I'm just laughing. To find what you know, so you're riding the thoughts, and then maybe somewhere in there, you'll find that centeredness that gives you what you know. That's what I think about it. That's what I think about knowing and thinking. There you go.
That's what you know about thinking and what you think about knowing.
There you go.
I really appreciate those distinctions. I think that's really powerful. It sounds like you're saying that knowing has a different sensation to it. And so really one way to navigate between those two poles would be to identify what the feeling of knowing is for you. So each person might feel that a little differently in their body, or they might feel it a little differently in the way that they engage with the material. So just being able to say like, oh, this is my know stuff and this is my not know stuff, and picking those up and assigning accordingly. I really like that. Nate, I'd like to hear your thoughts on thoughts and stuff.
Well, so it's interesting because even though, I think I'm probably one of the least spiritual individuals here, I think that there's something to intuition, to just knowing when something's right for you or knowing that something's true. And I think there's a lot of power in just accepting those moments when you are certain and following through. I think that if you know something, go for it. But when I'm just thinking something, I'm riddled with self-doubt. And so, but in those rare moments where I know something, or where I have an intuition that tells me to just go for it or this is the right move, I always stick with that. And it's only been a horrible mistake of 2 or 3% of the time.
Horrible mistake.
That's like that pretty much rounds down to none.
Yeah, those are great odds for my life.
Yeah, those are great.
I hope that made sense.
Yeah, that made a lot of sense, and I think it's cool to hear the three perspectives because they all sort of wrap together and basically point to the same conclusion. So I guess another thing that might be helpful is, okay, if you notice you're in thinking and you'd like to be in knowing, how do you go from one place to the other? How could you?
Ooh, meditation. Ooh. Not attaching to whatever's coming up. That's currently going on in my life. That's why I say that.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And that's true for me too. What you were saying about like thoughts being really chaotic and moving around a lot, and what Nate was saying too. I think that's like a clue to me that I could be a little stiller, or that I'm trying to get something. When do you notice, let's see, from a no standpoint, how do you communicate that with other people? When you say, I know this, and I might not have the reasoning or the logic to back it up.
Divine knowing, divine wisdom that you can't, like you have no factual information. How do we explain that?
Well, I'm sorry, your volume was a little down for me. For a second, what was the first part of what you said?
Oh, you did it again.
Wait, divine wisdom. So you mean like how do we explain the divine wisdom without having that concrete base? We can say, oh, go to page 60, doing this, and read about that.
So like in a very mind thought oriented world, when you have a conclusion like that and you want to express it, and someone's like, well, how do you know? Like, what do you say?
Isn't that when we take it back? For me personally, that's when I would take it back to my intuition and my gut feeling. And how do you explain a gut feeling? It's yours. It's, it's not tangible. So, but for me also, relating everything in energy terms seems to be a little bit more understandable or easier to grasp because people are familiar with energy, just in scientific terms.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one way I would.
I personally rely on just like data, previous experiences. I'll be like, we had this discussion before. This happened, or just give people examples of when I've been right. Like I have this weird sense for danger. Like if we're out at a bar or something, I'm like, a fight's gonna break out. I know it. Let's get out of here. And if they're like, come on, you're overreacting, I'll be like, remember Summerfest 2004? Remember Scottsdale 2006? I'm always right. And but that's maybe just because I think a lot of my friends need like concrete examples, whereas if I tried to mention like something intangible, a feeling, they'd just laugh in my face sometimes.
Frank, you do a lot of work of giving like people the ability to accept their own knowing and sort of ride that out whenever you're communicating with someone, like or sharing that message or that opportunity. What have you found to be effective?
As far as like trying to explain the distinction to them, or
trying to give somebody like the courage or the like slap on the ass to follow what they know is true for them.
Like if someone kind of starts in and they're like, oh, this is what I want to do, I watch what they do, like how they act, and if they just light up, then I run with it. I'm like, all right, that's cool. Like what's next? Like that's really, it's just a lot of like encouragement, but really keeping things as simple as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think at that point when you like start to express like, oh, I want to make this big life move or some kind of change, you're almost feeling out yourself by other people's reactions who you trust. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So if they light up, then I'll run with that and see where they go next.
Mm-hmm.
and just keep things in real simple, like big statements. Oh, so what's next? Are you gonna do that next week? That's rad. Like really lots of just, again, like very simple encouragement. If they go deeper, then I'll go deeper. If they don't, then I just keep it there. And also just I just share like their feeling with them. Okay, I replay it.
It sounds like you're able to see their vision too, and so like by two people looking at it, maybe it's realer. And then you're saying like, don't worry about going over there. Like, what's that thing right there you can do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of that.
Yeah, huge fan as well. Going into, so continuing thinking, where is thinking valuable, or to you, what is useful about the mind? Because everyone's like, don't use like silence, like be still the mind.
Yeah.
So what is it for then? This is a question I'm still kind of asking myself. Do well with it.
I think the mind is pretty much everything that you like. How can I phrase this? Like it's very popular. Let me try to phrase it this way. It's very popular, I guess, to kind of like talk down the ego and like, oh, don't let the ego like get in the way and this and that. But that's just the ego speaking already. Like to say, oh, I'm gonna get out of my way, or it's. So speaking of the mind is the ego to me, and like that's just your operating place. It's like your office, and you can't work if you're not at your office. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I like that you can't work if you're not at your office. That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, even if work gets done, you're not aware of it. So it's like, did it happen or does it matter? You know. Did that more answer your question, or like speak on that?
Yeah, I think so. I've kind of been thinking about like the mind being like what's on these train tracks of time, and I think it's a tool that you can kind of like use. But if you're just riding in that, it's a very kind of mundane existence, because it's like it's just kind of like straight, and there's no room for magic or possibility. Or like the quantumness of like anything can happen. Like if you're just in your mind and you're just in linear time, then you don't really get to enjoy that or share in that.
Box for yourself when because you're basing it off of the past. Everything's off of the past based on what you experienced, and then you're linking that to, your feelings and then your beliefs and your thoughts. It's all old stuff. So it does keep you in a confined space. It's not limitless, which is what, the quantum heart-based multidimensional theory of beingness that we are. So, yeah.
Nate, do you want to jump in on this one?
So, I'm working on becoming better at meditating and quieting my mind. I think that's really important and helpful. But at the same time, I like internal dialogue. I like the fact that I'm able to work through all these complex issues, or not even complex issues, silly day-to-day things in my own mind. And there's definitely a time where that gets overwhelming, and it can become, with me, it's like anxiety, or I'll overthink things. But and in those moments, I think meditation, learning to control all that's great. But at the same time, I really do just kind of like the voice in my head most of the time. And I think that's really important, to just trust it and listen to it.
That's a cool perspective. Yeah. I bet yours is really funny.
Yeah. Well, I'll unleash him sometime.
And move into emotional boundaries. So one of the biggest things I see as opportunities for people is recognizing that by serving their own needs, or appreciating their own needs or perspective or emotion, that they're actually serving everybody better. but there's a little trepidation in the beginning to be like, well, this will make them upset, or what if they're mad about this, or the, you know. So in your own experience, what has it been like, and saying like, hey, this is good for me, and like you do you. Oh, sorry, your volume.
What is going on? It's all these crystals I have. Hello? Hello? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? What should I do different?
You need to just like hum for the first 2 seconds, because there's like a 2-second delay, and then we can hear you.
Yeah.
And that's a bad idea, but.
Or
Oh. I don't even know what we were talking about now. I'm easily distracted.
we were talking about emotional boundaries. Why should you, or why is it, or how have you been like, this is what's important to me, and I'm going to honor that, even though it might not be what you think it should be or what's comfortable for you?
Okay. So, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. I know it's always been very difficult for me to set emotional boundaries because I was so highly tuned in to how other people were feeling, and then there was a sense of responsibility that I needed to please them somewhere along the line. So when I started to learn to set emotional boundaries with the people that I had usually been pleasing, there was a lot of backlash. There was a lot of resistance, like, no, you know, that's not this, blah, 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 challenging me. But really what that was having me define my boundaries better and to realize what I needed most compared to what I was feeling. I think I just went off on a tangent. Maybe I did a little bit.
You had stuff that we needed. We were asking. That made a lot of sense to me. Nate, what about like from the boys? What's it like for you in expressing emotion? Or, I mean, for a while, I wasn't able to consider that other people's internal experiences were different than mine. And I certainly wasn't able to be like, oh, it's much different to be a man. Like that experience was so far off my radar, I couldn't even really fathom what it might be like. So maybe you can tell us a little bit what it's like to be like a dude with emotions and boundaries that you're aware of.
Well, I can only speak for myself. Anytime I try to speak for all men, it goes horribly wrong. So this is just me. But I had to learn that myself. I mean, I used to do this thing where if I was dating somebody, I would say things that I thought they wanted to hear. And it didn't work out. Even though you think it will, it just makes them unhappy. They don't respect anything. So now I'm completely honest in everything that I do, you know, up front about how I feel on certain things. And shockingly, to my surprise, I thought that meant everyone was going to abandon me. But people really like that more, you know? I think they want to hear what you have to say. They want you to be honest and be like, I actually, you know, hate the Jonas Brothers or whatever it is I don't know enough about them, but they want you to be honest about your feelings. And so I had to learn that for me, being honest and in terms of setting emotional boundaries, it's just best to be upfront. And just say where you're at, because if you try to hide it or sort of pretend it doesn't exist, it just doesn't work out in my experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel that.
And I think too, if you're aware enough of yourself that you're able to set a boundary, that is the ultimate act in self-love and self-care. Because so you know what triggers you, and so if you. I'm sorry. Is there a lag? Go ahead.
Go.
Right now?
No, okay.
I'm confused. I'm officially confused.
You just said you know what triggers you, and I wanted to hear the rest of it.
Oh, so if you know what triggers you enough to say that, okay, if I'm in that type of experience or somebody treats me this way and it triggers me to make me feel awful, if you are aware of that enough to be able to say, I don't like when you do that, you know, it makes me feel this, that, and the other, and so that's not an acceptable behavior, then that is an act of self-love, because then you're not controlling other people, but you're protecting yourself. And especially when you, There are lots of people who experience trauma and pain and things of that nature. And even while they're healing, they need to be able to set boundaries to be able to heal and feel safe in certain areas. And that right there in and of itself is an act of self-love.
And I think too, from like an energetic standpoint, whenever you set a boundary, you're pretty much saying like, I trust in abundance, because you're not clinging to something in a way that's like, I can't jack this up. You're like, no, like it or don't like it, I'll create space for more.
Yeah, I generally agree with Nate about being upfront, and yeah, it really just, I mean, like everybody wants other people to be themselves. So if you're just yourself, you're making everything better. You know?
Yeah.
And also just when I'm like excited about stuff, it tends to rub off. And so like boundaries, like sort of, they just find themselves in my experience.
True.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I have a question real quick, since we're on boundaries though. One thing I noticed though is when you do set boundaries, sometimes people will really push back. You know, for example, with me, I work all the time. I can only set aside a certain amount of days, like 3 days, to hang out with my friends or people, you know, that I'm dating. And I'll have people that will push back and say, you're being selfish, or you're doing this. And it's always interesting in that I like to hear other people's perspective on how to deal with that. Because blocking them isn't the best move. I'm just kidding. I don't do that. But
Oh, I do. Block your ass.
Hey, actually, this is interesting. So now I kind of like to open. So that would be like the external management of boundaries, but internal tension here. So if everything outside is a reflection of something inside, and you're pulling something in to work through it or see it live, when somebody is not respecting you, what would be one, or like how could you flip that, use it as a mirror and a way to say like, okay, where am I pinched off from source, or where am I not completely open to light? Does that make sense? So I guess with Nate, if that's your experience, and I would think somewhere inside you are feeling guilty, or you haven't forgiven somebody or yourself for not allocating time appropriately or in a way that felt good to them or something. Does that make sense?
yeah, well, and you're definitely right. I mean, the reason it affects me is because I think that they're right. You know, I think, oh, I'm definitely not giving them enough time. Reasonable people would make more time, but yeah, I'm open to hearing suggestions, because I don't have it necessarily all figured out. I try to just stay, you know, not let it impact me, because I know that what I'm doing makes sense for me, and there's reasons for it. And if there's someone that needs me, you know, 24/7, it's not going to work anyways, as a friend or as a relationship. So I know I'm just saving everyone sort of time in the long run if that's what they need. But I maybe don't handle it in the best way, because, you know, I just ignore it mainly. It's not good.
So my approach or my strategy that I'd suggest would be, before you do anything with it outside, consider allowing yourself to be okay with how much time you're spending or not. Saying like, this is where I am, and this is what I'm doing, and this is great for me. And like, you get really okay with it first, and then have conversations as they arise.
I agree. I mean, if you don't want to work so much, I mean, not just something you need to like start sorting out your own way, you know, that then someone else telling you like, oh, you're too busy for me, you're being selfish. And if you're like internalizing it at all, then yeah, like what Shaylee's saying is, I agree with that maybe you need to think about, am I working too much? Like, do I need to actually, is this problem showing up because of, is this a symptom of that problem? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd ask like, are you happy with how much you're working? Because I think you like what you do.
I do. So I do. It's unique in that I like what I'm doing, because the amount of time I work is directly proportional to what we're going to get out of it in the end. You know, it's a startup life. So I'm fine with that, but I do understand what bothers me internally, if it's anything, is that I know most people have expectations. They need to see people multiple times, friends, relationships. They want to see that you're putting an effort. And I can't, hang out on a Wednesday night. So, and I do feel, I guess I feel bad about that. But what I will do is try to realize, overall, I know that I'm happy with what I'm doing. There's a reason for it. And it's okay to be busy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think too, that would be, so like metaphysically, there would be the mind kind of in the way that I see it holds in everything from flowing. It's like the grate that things get stuck in. And so it sounds like there's an idea that you think that was probably passed on through conditioning or the environment, that meaningful relationships are only those that are tended to regularly. And I would argue that that's not necessarily true to have deep connections. The more I step into who I am, the more I attract people who know who they are. And the connection is so strong and so fast because all of us are at the surface. There's not like that time to get used to each other, because you know stuff, you're there, they're there. It just like flows. So maybe just opening up to the idea of what friendship actually looks like or could look like.
Yeah, I like that. I like the sound of that.
It's like shopping something new.
We'll check back in though. I'm going to just, open up. I'm going to put this energy out, and I better be making friends left and right on the subway. Otherwise, I'm going to come back and complain.
Friends who like to be friends, how you like to be friends.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wait, I'm going to put that on a shirt. Friends who like to be friends the way you like to be friends.
Damn right. That would be a good shirt.
Yeah.
I'll put that in a Curious Hustler welcome pamphlet. Okay, let's talk about. Oh, okay. I thought this might be interesting. Having what is your relationship to your body, and what role does in your mind? What role does nutrition play? What role does movement play? How do you use it to know? Like, what is it to you? Like, talk to me about bodies.
Hello, I would like to go. Okay. Well, everything's energy, so that's what I bring it back to. So your body is the vessel, the avatar, the physical manifestation of the energy that you are, and everything. It holds everything. So it holds your thoughts. That's energy. It holds, your actual energy, like your energy levels, like your physical strength, things like that. And it holds all your experiences. So the body being physical and getting the body moving is just what energy is, because energy is molecules in motion, and that's what you are. So it's so vital to your system to be in motion. Dee-doo. And as far as food and everything goes, if we talk about vibrations and energy in motion, like in the way it vibrates, and it being positive energy vibrates really fast and is clean and expansive, and then denser negative energy or more tangible things are vibrating at a slower rate. So if you think about food, the foods that you put into your body are so important because they are correlating with your energy. So if food's alive, your thoughts are alive, everything's alive, and it's all integrated under the same category of being energy, then they're all correlated, and you need to move your body, and everything that you put into your body is going to operate in a system. Also, I wanted to say about getting physical and moving your body. We store so much energy in our subconscious mind, and we can't really access it, and it is highly influencing us at all times, shaping what we're doing and feeling. And when we move our bodies, we kind of tap into, when we're focused on movement and getting our bodies moving and getting that energy flow, we're also allowing that subconscious energy to release from us. And because you're focused on something else, I notice, or in my experience, you can observe that subconscious energy a little bit easier than being in a situation, having something play out, and then being like, oh, I guess my belief system's all whacked out, Yeah, I don't know. That's what I've noticed lately about being physical, with energy, thought energy, and mental energy and stuff like that.
That's interesting. Yeah, I like that. Like a meditative state.
Yeah, kind of like a meditative state, but also just meditative in that you're consciously focused on something, whether it's physical activity or you're doing something or creating something, whatever it is. Like you're consciously focused on something so that subconsciously you can release that which is stored from your life experience. That's what I think. I think that's like one of the most important things about being physical.
Interesting. I like that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Gentlemen?
I like my body. It's good. It's thing. It allows me to, it's like it's the channel. It's like the TV and the channel that you get to experience like everything in life through. Just like everyone else, I've gone through periods where I'm like, I don't like this, or I wish this was like that, blah, blah, blah. But like, I've thankfully realized like none of that matters. You just take what you have and you just go up. Whatever you think you don't like, if there's a way you can change it, there's your moon mission for a little bit. That's what you do. And what else I've learned is to not, like, how can I put this? I don't really let certain things get me as emotional about my body. Does that make sense? Like if, how can I put this? Like if I have an injury, let's just say like I hurt my ankle, and instead of being like, oh shit, my ankle's all screwed up, it hurts, it sucks, I just go, okay, well, this is what I have, and I'm just gonna go up. So I just take every situation, and I kind of, when it comes to action, I like to just suck the emotion out of it. Not there. It's execution time.
Yeah.
But other than that, with nutrition, I've gotten better in the last, I'd say, like decade. I don't really think about nutrition quite as much, but I do pay attention to what tastes good. Lately, it's been like more fruit, and I generally eat like whole food. Tons of, other stuff like nachos and burgers still make their way in. But in general, like at home, like I don't really eat as much packaged food, and I can definitely tell that there's a difference. I think that like my mental evolution of understanding myself and my body has like grown up together with little improvements or enhancements to my diet.
Yeah, I've seen that. That makes sense. Nate, you want to jump too?
Well, this is I hate this topic just because I know that everyone like in this group is super in shape, and I see Instagram stories of people doing stuff, and I know it's so important, and it's such a beneficial thing, not just for your body but for your mind. But at the same time, I'm just sitting in bed eating a Twix when I watch these things, and I'm like, I wish I had more motivation to care. I'm lucky because I do. With nutrition, I just eat salads all the time because I'm not that active. But I wish that I was way more into it, because it just seems like important for multiple things. And I have friends who have terrible anxiety, and they were taking Xanax prescribed by their doctor, and then they just got into running, and then they're fine. They don't need pharmaceuticals anymore. And it's like, I want that feeling. I just don't have quite enough motivation to go to the gym more than once every 2 weeks. But obviously that's very important, and I think actually this is crazy, but hey, would be a fun thing. Once I made a graph of all the best periods of my life, like quarterly, right? Like what am I doing? How am I doing? Looking for patterns. And what correlated with my happiness the most was my weight. Like if I was like low weight, and I've never been underweight, so when I say at a low weight, I mean normal weight, that's when everything was great. And obviously, correlation isn't causation. I'm not saying it's because I was skinny, but I think it played off of when you're in shape. I felt good mentally as well as physically. And so opened up a lot of opportunities, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Am I a crazy person for creating that graph?
That's super informed, dude. That's really cool.
Have you seen Habit Book? Yeah. Well, I think that's an interesting thing. And again, like I say, like always take the guilt off, always take the should off, always take that, like swipe that right across, and then like look for what you're already doing. Are you walking to work? Are you like rolling your shoulders around a little bit? Like let that stuff start to count. No kidding. Because then your identity is like, oh, I like to be active. And then like you make more and more choices like that.
Yeah, I think that's really important because that's not my identity right now. Despite walking to work, yeah, I definitely feel lazy. So remove the guilt, believe that I'm an active person, and this is the first step. And then
Get a mantra, something like, I want to be active.
What's the funnest sounding thing like if you had a free afternoon, you're like, let's go I'm gonna go move my body. What would you do?
okay, obvious jokes aside, I'd probably play badminton.
Oh, sick.
Are you any good at tennis?
Not great at tennis. I did take second in Badger State games at badminton in 2002.
That's let's put that on a shirt too.
Yeah, I think that is on a shirt somewhere.
I
It's
want
an
one.
ironic T-shirt that they sell at Hot Topic, though. So
It's with fun sayings.
how's everyone doing with the meditation? Remember the last time we talked about how everyone was gonna, well, I was at least gonna try. And yeah, I tried a little bit.
How'd it go? Did it work out? Did you astral travel to a new dimension?
Plane like I was expecting. I did do what we expected. I did fall asleep several times. So I got great naps out of it. It is interesting though, because there is this moment where like you can sort of quiet your mind. And for me, there's constant like talking going. It's really interesting to me. This is a dumb side note, but I just learned that some people don't have voices, like an inner monologue in their head. Some people like just experience things. And for me, it's a constant inner monologue, like never ending. So and again, even though I like that person, which is just my voice, but it's important for me to be able to turn it off every once in a while. And I think there are moments in meditation where I'm listening and trying to think, and that there's a clarity and quietness. And I think that's like just the start, but that could be, really beneficial.
Are you doing it in silence for yourself, or are you using something to distract your conscious mind, like music or mantras or humming or tap dancing on the wall?
I live in Brooklyn. There is no silence.
That's true. That's true.
I think there's a quinceanera going on in the backyard right now, but I try to do it in silence. But I need like a little white noise. Otherwise, I start listening for weird things going on.
But that's still
This is the prophecy. I'll put it out there. Nate walked into the Shaylee show identifying as non-spiritual, non-magical. Like, wait till that happens. He's gonna be like robes with like a fucking scepter somewhere.
I would love that.
Counting his beads, he'll have like 101. He does the mantra every time.
But it's like, here's the beauty. Like, so, and this is really interesting. And Margot and I have talked about this some, but this is the first time, and I got this from Bruce Lipton, a PhD writer. This is the first time that like here's my mantra, here's my beads, here's my like robe mentality is in a world like Brooklyn, where it's like, I believe that to be true and I'm functioning in society. And I think it's so interesting to see how people express whenever they're not trying to follow, like, what are you just naturally drawn to? I had a call with a gentleman who's based in Hawaii, and he does, like, he's, a Reiki spiritual guy, and his highest expression of that is so different than mine. Like, what he think, what to him in that is way different than me. Like he's in the no coffee, no this, no that, only talks about this stuff. And I want to build shit with business. Like I want to be dancing in the streets. Like I want to be mixing it up in the world. Like that to me is now spiritual. Like that's the most spiritual shit I could do.
I feel pretty similarly. Like you do your work to be out in the world to show people how to do it. You know, not to just like retreat.
Yeah.
I mean, I can respect it. That's cool. It's your life. Do what you want to do. Like, but it's just more fun, just bringing it out.
Well, ultimately, what I'm coming to in this like healed mind, where it's like without separation, where it's like it's all God, it's all good. There are conditions when you're moving through the spiritual path where you think that you can't have it both ways. Where it's like, well, I can't be this way because the world won't support it. But it's like as you like open the mind up and you can step in, it's like this incredible painting that you just like move around and anything is possible. There are no conditions, there are no causal chains. Like it's whatever you want. And it's not until you surrender that it has to be a certain way for you to be a certain way that that's possible.
And that's the true embodiment of being, of what you just said, you know, because we're in this age where we are merging the old outdated ways with this new way, and the way that the collective way things become mainstream is by embodying it, you know, by seeing those people out there. How many people now do you see that spirituality and this movement, you can call it the spiritual movement, the new age movement, it's really an energy movement, whatever you want to call it. But how many people now do you see that, like famous people talking about the stuff that you would really only read in esoteric literature or things like that? Like it's becoming, we're merging into this mainstream collective.
I think it's God.
Oh, God agrees. Yeah, and I think this is a really cool time and space to be in, where we are actually physically watching everything unfold or expand. It's like the actual expansion becoming. It's becoming. Woo! Woohoo! That's it. Yeah, the embodiment. That's what I mean. That's it. That's the only word I should have said.
That's beautiful. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the Shaylee Show. It's been wonderful having you. If you want to send me, I have Nate's picture. Margot, whenever you want to send one, whatever one you want to use, and like your stuff for your website, and Frank too, like anything you want to send, I'll put it and attach it, you know.
Should I just put a link to my Tinder profile or?
Oh my God. Me too. No, just kidding. Just kidding. Shh. Edit that out.